The only thing more useless than learning static open chord guitar shapes is Gmail's unsubscribe from spam email feature. Doesn't work. Feature doesn't work, guys. Don't try it. I've tried it over and over again. I still get the same stupid emails. But we're talking about guitar chords here. We're gonna do this today in the key of D, the key of 20-25. What I like about this key is the open strings are gonna help us out in this key, but it's not the most common one like C or G, so you might learn something new today. We're gonna break the string set into two halves, all right? So E, A, D being the bottom half, and then G, B, E being the top half. So the first one I wanna go through is just to rifle through what I made the joke about earlier about these static chord shapes not helping us because we can't move them around. Let's make just two shapes, go through all the chords in the key of D just on the highest three strings, okay? So if this isn't something that you've done before, you're gonna love this because it really solidifies the chords in this key really well, and then we'll switch it down to the lower half to do some cool, more, extended sounding things, right? So D major, you probably already know this one, right? Open D, 2 G, 3 B, 2 on the high E string. So this is a major chord, right? We don't need open strings to play this chord. We can just play the highest three strings. The nice thing about getting that open D string in the bass is it fills the chord out a little bit. Also, that open A string is fair game because it is the fifth in the key of D, D, E, F sharp, G, A. So it's in the chord and the key, so it fits. Now, a lot of times on guitar, you probably want the root note to be the note that you hit lowest because it kind of has, with a thicker string and a lifted significance in the chord, but you can get that A in there. Now, the nice thing about going to the next chord, the 2 chord in the key of D, is E minor. Easiest way to play E minor is just play the top 3 strings, right? Again, this is probably the more traditional E minor chord voicing, but what I want to do is I want to go from here to here, okay? So now this is a D minor shape moved 2 frets higher, okay? So we're gonna play through the chord scale just using these 2 shapes. We can do the whole thing, all 6 main chords in the key of D, using the D major shape and also the D minor shape, just going through, okay? Now again, you don't have to be super tight with this because if you accidentally hit the A or the D strings or even the E string, those notes are in the key. Oftentimes those notes will be in the actual chord too. So it might sound a little messier, but it's not gonna sound wrong because it's still gonna be harmonically correct. Now, if you wanna use your pinky to do this, right? So the way I'm playing this E minor chord, I've got my pointer finger on the 3rd fret of the high E string, and then either your pinky or your ring finger on the 5th fret of the B string, and then your middle finger is gonna be on the 4th fret of the G string. But I think it's better to not think of the actual fret numbers. It's more about getting the shape, and then however you wanna see it. I always think of like the highest fret to kind of pivot off of. So when I go from D, I'll do this, right? So D major to E minor, I'll get my ring finger to that E first. Again, this is the root note, if not the bass note of the chord. So D to E, and then I'll get my other fingers there, right? So D major, E minor. F sharp minor would be the next thing. Now, the thing that you may already know how to make a major scale, right? You can spell a major scale in intervals. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, right? So if we were to go through the D major scale, we could start on a D, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Check out the Patreon for more involved information on that in a kind of slower, ground up way. But just like we can do whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, the root note for the chords that we're going to be building up and down this selection right here is going to move in that same intervallic formula, as it were, right? So a whole step from D to E is just like that, so I can kind of just get my finger there, and then another whole step, minor chord, same thing is going to be F sharp minor. After this is the half step, so your ring finger or pinky, whichever one you're using, just goes a half step up, and then you make it major. So there's that D major shape again, but now it's 7, 8, 7 would be the fret numbers on here, and that is a G major chord. Whole, whole, half, whole would be another major chord. So there's A major, right? So we've got D, E minor, F sharp minor, G major, A major, another whole step. Now we've got here the B, the octave B, right, would be a B minor chord. And then that brings us all the way to the 12th fret, right? So we've covered so much ground just by kind of using these little shapes here. 2 shapes, you go through the entire thing, right? Now, what I think sounds really cool is when you play it not as a chord scale, but maybe more as a general chord progression would. So if you have like a 1, 4, 5 in the key of D, 1, D, E, F sharp, G, A, 1, 4, 5, very common chord progression, D, G, A, right? Open cowboy chord style, sounds great, especially on a Martin D18. Can't really beat it, but you might want to make it different. So if you make it different, you can be like, all right, I'm gonna go from here, I'm gonna skip those 2, and I'm gonna get down to this fret right here and here. So then I go, and then now what's cool about this is it opens up different cool things that you could do around the key of D that I bet you've already done, like these like little hammer-ons where you kind of add that suspended 4 thing. Maybe you open it up, right, to inflect it. Now, here, let's just do it, right? And then we'll talk about what's going on afterwards. Then, now what's really cool about that, and what's interesting is like when you get into that G chord right here, when we add that pinky there, that's actually a C, which in this key is a C sharp instead of a C, but it doesn't matter because we're doing it in a cohesive way. That sounds really good. It sounds like a song. Speaking of songs, if you want to upload your songs to the internet, use DistroKid, the sponsor of today's video. It is the only way, in my opinion, to get your music online. Super, super low cost. You just have to have a file of the song, piece of artwork. You can even do this from your phone on the app now. Upload the track. You can set a release date. It'll help you promote it. It'll give you like a pre-save link. It gives you so many different features, it's impossible to talk about just in one video. Just trust me, it is the easiest, least amount of friction in going through all like the kind of not fun parts about getting your music online. So if you do have any music that you want people to hear, just put it up on DistroKid. They'll distribute it to Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, literally way more streaming services that you even knew existed. And then they also keep track of all the money in like a bank, and they can pay you out just from the website right there. The other cool thing about it is if you're doing collaborative stuff, which I have a bunch of collabs coming up with people, you can actually split who owns what percentage of the song right there in the app, and it just takes care of all the different, you know, financial distribution channels. So thank you to DistroKid for sponsoring this video. They've been a huge sponsor of mine over the years. Big fan of their service. Like I said, best in the business. If you are ever putting anything online, literally anything, I really think that there's no other option. It's really just DistroKid because the price is right, so easy to use, and then, you know, use these cool fire tips, and then make some music, put it online, and send me a link to it so I can check out what you guys are doing, right? So, we've got all these different, really 2 chord voicings, but with cool inflections that you can do to kind of make things sound a little more different. Now, I also want to talk about how we can use the lower 3 strings to maybe get a bassier sound and then keep the high end of just what is essentially an E minor chord, still thinking in the key of D as the 2 chord, right? D, E, so it's 2 chord. Just open on the high end of the strings, right? So what I want to do first is I want to do different chord voicings through the neck of the guitar, right? This is going to be it can be a stretch if you've never done this one before, but it's really worth learning, right? So, right here. I really love this chord voicing right here. So this is a D right here, middle finger, 5th fret on the A string. There's our root note. It's major 3rd. And in fact, we can just go through the main chords like this, just using this shape. D, G, A, and then get all the strings. Now the thing about this, when you do it this way, it's almost the higher strings take up too much of the identity of the chord. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna add the octave of the root note right here with your pinky. You can do it with your ring finger if you're an actual savage, but that's crazy. So I'm using my pinky to get the octave. So it's the D on the G string, 7th fret, and then I've got root note, 3rd, and then the octave. So the 5th would be implied here, okay? But right there, now since I have 2 of the root notes, I still get the openness, which is cool, of like the top strings. But I have a little more of a base, a little more of a foundation because I have 2 of the root notes. And then now I can do the same thing going higher to a G and an A like here. D, G, A. Or I can go lower. And it's just different options that you have instead of always going D, G, A, D, G, A, D, G, A. I think this is 5 to 10 to 12, D, G, A, right? So starting to think of these in intervals and spaces between, memorizing those just by like, all right, root note, how do I get to my next major chord? 5 to 10, well, I can think of that as 5 frets, so no matter what key I'm in, no matter where I am on the guitar, I can go 5 frets higher, and that's gonna get me from the 1 to the 4 chord. 2 frets higher from that is a 5 chord, or I can think of 7 frets being the root note, the root chord to its 5th. A lot of different ways you can start doing it, but you need to make these connections first, and then it really translates to every other part, every other key on the guitar, and then it's so much better than just using static chord shapes that you can't move, right? These are all movable, even if you don't want to get the open strings. Again, we're adding the open strings for flavor and vibe, because that's what we do here. But you can just do, if you want a more controlled way, I'm kind of palm muting here, right? Now, one thing that I like to do is I like to make extension chords out of pretty much everything that I play, right? Teetering on the brink of jazz, which is where I live my life. Just on that brink of jazz. Never go full jazz, because then you'll be broke and you'll be a tough hang. But if you teeter on the brink of jazz, then you're just a man or woman of pure cultural support, right? So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna take, for the D chord, the octave, and I'm gonna go back a fret. So now it's a D major 7 chord. And then listen how pretty that is. Oh my gosh. And you can actually go back and forth between both of them, right? You can even add the 6th if you want here. So again, those 3 voicings would be 5, 4, 7, open, 5, 4, 6, open, 5, 4, 4, open, right? And kind of moving around between those, I think is super cool. You can do the same thing with the 4 chord, which is another major 7 chord, G, major 7, 3, E, 2, A, 4, D. And then now, notice how those high strings affect that chord differently because of where it sits in the key. Can't do that on the A. You can, it's not gonna sound good. This is a dominant 7 chord, so we have a flat 7. So now it's 5, 4, 5. Slightly different shape, right? Again, there's our 5, 4, 7 octave. The 5 chord in any key has what's called a flat 7, so we don't do that. We go 2 frets back. See how much more interesting that is harmonically? So good. You can do the same thing, tracking the same strings, right? 1 chord, octave, 4 chord, octave, 5 chord, octave. And look at how much ground you've covered just by kind of taking 2 different concepts, messing around with the majorness of them, making them extended, making them dominant 7 chords, You're going to write some great music. You're going to put it up online via DistroKid. You're going to send me a link. You're going to subscribe to my email. You're going to try to unsubscribe to that newsletter using Gmail's unsubscribe feature. It's not going to work. You're going to get the next email, and the cycle continues. But thank you for being here for that cycle. If you have any questions or comments, hit me up in the comment section, Instagram, or the website. I'll talk to y'all soon.